Well, let us get right to it. If you're a little confused about the names and dates and personas, I've already put up some recent videos explaining Aaron's background, but being very brief, he's a YouTuber who spent, yes, his very young years in Scientology until a young adult, but he took a vacation, which he often forgets to tell people, but he sometimes mentions it. And Serge also entered Scientology very young until his adult years. Ironically, he stayed in Scientology much longer than Aaron. He tends not to emphasize that either. But I just want to get into what exactly are my skepticism or questions about either one of them. And again, it's the nature of YouTube. You have to be very careful with certain words. You trigger the words, the robots or whatever, automated systems are like, no, no, no. That just hurts a video. So I have to use very PC language here. I will do something a little bit more explicit for channel members because I do think it's an important issue. So let's just get to the basic gist. So a couple of years ago, and again, I want to try to be as fair and accurate as possible because it's very confusing. Essentially what happened is Serge apparently was accusing Marty Rathbun, and being real quick, Rathbun was a very, and I mean very highly placed official. He left the church in the early 2000s, but had a lot of devastating information, which he did share. And again, remember, when you get that high in Scientology, you are trained to be a liar and manipulator. So you got to be careful with him. But a lot of the information is solid. And essentially over the decades, because he was in it for a while, Marty put out a lot of anti-Scientology, a lot of critical articles, blog posts. However, he was always sort of hewed carefully that he was opposing Miscavige. He even wrote several books. I went through one of them. But he wasn't really challenging the church doctrine, right? So it's sort of like Hubbard good, but Miscavige bad. That was his line. But again, good or bad, he was one of the very early critics, again, in the 2000s. He was always suspected. A lot of people did not like him. He's a very controversial figure. Where he is now, we don't know. A lot of people suspect he went back to the church. We're not even going to get into that. But anyway, so Serge, and this never aired. Apparently this never happened, but 2020 did an interview with him, this kind of documentary special. I actually saw that. And it does feel, to put it mildly, heavily edited. And apparently there was a section they never decided to air where Serge, I'm going to have to use very PC language, accused Rathbun of bananas, orange, and the grape. And you're like, okay, that's a pretty devastating accusation. And thus far, no follow-up. And apparently the idea is that, I think this is what was being asserted, that Serge was the victim. And Rathbun, well, that's the accusation. So, and again, remember, Rathbun now pretty clearly is being paid by the church. He has some kind of deal with the church. He does do official propaganda for them. So, we've got to be very careful. So, he responded in several different ways, and there's a bigger background. I'm not getting into all the names and figures because people are saying I'm confusing people. But essentially, Rathbun had a similar thing where one of the, putting in air quotes, they're not really anti-Scientology, one of the anti-Scientology leaders went to him and said, you know, what would be really interesting or good is if you, this is Rathbun, again, she kind of knew this was not true, this is one of the leaders, was accuse Miscavige of banana, orange, and the grape. And Rathbun is like, wait, what? Saying, yeah, just put it out there. You know, he's a monster, which I agree. Miscavige is all kinds of monstrosities. And again, it's YouTube, I'm forced to say this. Allegedly, he's guilty of murder, mass murder. Allegedly, although I think the evidence is pretty convincing he is guilty. But we'll put that aside. I can say formally, I think this is safe, that he sent out detectives with illegal guns after his father. I think that now is provable. If YouTube has an issue, I can just say, nope, it's proven. We have journal articles on this. So, not a nice guy. Pretty evil man. But I would also be forced to be honest and say, I don't think there's any evidence that he himself ever did that. But one of these anti-Scientology leaders that was helping Rathbun was like, yeah, I think that's good. You should put that out there. And Rathbun is like, I am not going to do that. That's just bat crazy. And unfortunately, although I do not like Rathbun because his own record in Scientology, I want to emphasize, is very bloody. This guy did a lot of horrific things. However, that was just too much. And that was sort of like the beginning of his disillusionment with a lot of these people that they're going to say anything or do anything to destroy Miscavige, which Again, I'm halfway there with them because he's a monster. But yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to put out fake grape stories. That's just not useful. And so Rathbun slowly started to get away from these people. So we're sort of stuck here. Now, it might shock people. I actually agree with Aaron a little bit. So Aaron put out a video years ago defending Serge because Rathbun apparently was denying he even knew who Serge was. And I think Aaron did a good job in his video showing that's pretty hard to believe because Serge was kind of this rising star among the young auditors. And given where Rathbun was, he'd spent some time in Florida, you know, put two and two together. There's just no way you would not know who this guy is. But Rathbun, again, formally says nothing happened. I don't know who this kid is. He doesn't name Serge. My recollection of the video is, I'm trying to track it down now, is that they were saying, well, this young kid claims that you did something in Scientology with him. And he's like, I don't know. What are you talking about? I don't know this guy. Who are you talking about? I don't know. It is like two sides are lying to you. They're both pathological. I have no idea where the truth is. But Rathbun, for his part, says, I don't know this guy. And by the way, if you do this, I will sue you. I will sue 2020. So 2020 decided to edit the interview. And that's where we are. We're stuck. We have no idea who's telling the truth. I actually do agree with Aaron. It is hard to believe that Rathbun did not know of or encounter Serge. I mean, given where he is with RTC, which is technically the corporation controlling Scientology, and given what he does a lot of spy work, you would think he would just be aware of Serge, because that's what you do as a spy. You're just aware of your potential targets. But again, as far as I know, Serge never produced independent evidence, so we're stuck. I mean, is Serge being serious? Was he saying that full-on Rathbun hurt him, or that Rathbun was aware he was hurt and did a cover-up? I don't know. Serge has never, as far as I know, brought the accusation back, so we're just stuck. Was this all just a black op? Like, we're just going to say Rathbun did this, just leave the accusation hanging in the air just to discredit him? Because let's be very clear, this is a very emotive issue where the people are just picking sides and hate one another. I don't know. But that's like, it's just worrying on both sides that, one, some, quote, anti-Scientology leaders, I don't think they are anti-Scientology leaders, would willingly do that. Let's just put out fake stories around this. That's like, whoa, wait. On the other hand, being fair-minded, if Serge does have evidence of this, he's never brought it, as far as I know. He did have a lawsuit against Scientology, because we're going to conclude soon, and it failed. His lawsuit failed. He was making these wild allegations with tunnels and children, as he usually does. That said, the Clearwater Police is extremely corrupt. The court system in Florida is extremely corrupt. It could be he had a legit case, and they dismissed it because, you know, Scientology bribed people, and that's all there is to it. On the other hand, apparently there is this dangling accusation against Rathbun out there. He's denying it. He's saying, I don't know who this Serge guy is. This never happened. I mean, I find it personally unbelievable that Rathbun would be with a young little kid. I just don't believe that myself. But he's a monster, so we're kind of stuck on both sides. But that's one reason I'm very suspicious of Serge, that he might willingly put out fake stories like this for reasons. I think that's very dangerous, but that is where we are. It's just a really puzzling episode in this back and forth with these ex-Scientologists warring with one another.